so much for coming to our Understanding Standards and Depth of Knowledge grades 9 through 12 webinar. First and foremost, we would like to thank the New Hampshire Department of Education. They are the sponsors of this webinar series, and without them, we wouldn't be able to bring all of this great information to you. So we thank them again for our partnership. Everybody is muted, so we can't hear you. We can't see you. If you could please ask your questions in the Q&A section of your Zoom screen, that's where we have, we'll be looking for most of the questions. There are times where people want to raise their hand to ask a question. It is a little bit tricky in a webinar format, so we're going to ask you, if you can, please put your questions in that Q&A section. You will get an email tomorrow with a link to your PD certificate. It will show you where the video for this webinar is and the PowerPoint and any of the documents that we're going to be referring to today. At the end of the webinar, when I close out, there will be a brief survey. We really value your feedback, so if you could give us the feedback, that would be great. If you have to get off just a little bit early, the link to the survey is also going to be in the email tomorrow. So this is the team that we have on the information session today. I'm Heather Jenkins. We also have Annie Wallace here from the New Hampshire Department of Ed.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming.
And we have Kate McCaffrey as well as on this particular training today.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here and being part of this module series.
All right, so getting started here, the first thing that we want to talk about is really knowing your standards. Then we're going to get into that understanding depth of knowledge and then how we can transfer that to the classroom. And then we'll have some time for wrap up and question and answer. So first and foremost, standards are the expectations that really in any job that you have shape your job and help you figure out what you're supposed to be doing to do your job well. For us, those are the academic standards as educators. That's what we follow, and those are those set of expectations of what we want all students to learn. Right. We're guided by the state and national standards. For the most part, they are the New Hampshire, or not the New Hampshire, but the Common Core standards, and New Hampshire has adopted those as well. There are a couple of districts that I know go by district standards, but those are also, again, based in the Common Core. So that's what we'll be talking about a lot this afternoon. Why we use them? We use them really to provide a framework for what we're supposed to be teaching and what those learning priorities are for our students. They also help us design and shape our curriculum and assessments. So especially at the high school level, we want to make sure with our classes that we are providing that same design and structure for similar classes, even if we have more than one teacher teaching that class. So the standards can really help us with that. Specifically to help us with this last bullet point and making sure that all students have access to those same learning goals and expectations. So again, when we're talking about the standards, for math and ELA, we're talking about the Common Core standards. For science, we're looking at the next generation science standards. And also, if you are somebody who teaches humanities or social studies, the English standards have some of those built in as well, both for the humanities and history and for science. And they're the reading standards that are associated with those particular areas as well. When it comes to understanding the standards, we have what are called domains or reporting categories. So these are ELA standards. These are the Common Core standards right here. And within that, you have specific domains. So you can see right here, I have reading standards for literature and reading standards for informational text. There's writing standards and so on and so forth. So those are the reporting categories. For math, these are your conceptual categories for high school. So these are really what you're basing a lot of your core content for your classes on. For science, we're looking at physical life and earth science, and then we have different portions of those underneath there. So once we look at a specific domain, right now this is reading standards for literature in grades 6 through 12. We have what are called clusters of standards. So within reading standards for literature, we have key ideas and details, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas. All of those are what are called clusters underneath that particular domain. And then you have your individual skills and standards that are listed underneath that. So again, as you're creating course content, this is what you're basing your course content around. For math, this is an example of some of your clusters of math. So we have the real number system here and quantities. And then underneath that, the clusters are extend the properties of exponents and rational exponents, use properties of rational and irrational numbers. And then for quantities, we start with reason quantitatively and use units to solve problems. So those are your clusters. And then you have, again, your individual standards and skills that students will need to be able to master that are based on those clusters of standards. For science, it's a little bit different. Your clusters are your disciplinary core ideas. So underneath physical science, here are some of the high school disciplinary core ideas. And then underneath that, you have specific performance expectations that are listed. So they're just set up just a little bit different way, but similar with the way that they're structured.
For ELA, we need to begin by building a foundation for educators. We must model and demonstrate how to really make strong connections, learning how to draw inferences and think critically around the text, and provide students with the tools and foundational skills to support their learning. Next, educators need to model and support with a variety of text, fiction, and nonfiction, really thinking about authors' craft, critical thinking and literacy, and continuing to expose a variety of high-quality literature to increase the challenge and rigor. Educators can really model that higher thinking skills by reading text in history, social studies, science, and other disciplines. Students will build foundational knowledge in these fields that will also provide them with vocabulary and rich background knowledge to be better readers in the content area. And by doing this, if this is intentional and structured to develop a rich content across the disciplines, we really want to get to that intentional, structured, and rich thinking and literacy. So the common themes in the ELA standards are a variety of text, always going back and grounding everything in evidence from the text when we're writing, reading, and speaking, and integrating knowledge across the discipline. So really in this level, we really want to prepare these students for the college and career readiness. And these same key red ideas are built all the way from kindergarten until 12th grade. But at your level, they're getting really specific. You're really looking at the key ideas and details, the craft, how the author is crafting and structuring their literature, integrating again those knowledge across the disciplines, and then really having a variety of texts with a complexity and range. So those are the key ideas that are essential at this level to prepare them for college. Again, here is your anchored standards. You see those same keys, and then you see this underneath. That's okay. Then you see all of what you need to teach in as 1, 2, and 3 across 9 through 12. Again, building. So in writing, it's very similar, except for the writing has much more rigor at this level. So again, you need to have different texts and types with a purpose. Why are we writing? What is the purpose of this writing? Is it to have an argument? Is it to do a research? Is it to have a narrative? And then really thinking about how do we structure that writing, as well as building research, which I will get into at the next couple slides, and then having a range of writing and exposing that at this level. So the real central themes throughout the Common Core are arguments that are grounded in evidence, informal and exploratory writing with topics of ideas and concepts, again, understanding how it's organized and the analysis, and then narratives, understanding how to craft a narrative and how to make that language come to life with interesting levels of crafting on that author's craft. This is the most important piece. When they are writing at this level, they really need to have a clear organization and really make sure that they're structured, the introduction, the paragraphs, the conclusion. They need to go through that writing process. They need to revise, edit, re-edit, look at the writing from different levels. Writing can always be improved, but that is so essential in this level. And as with everything, always going back to that text, always referring to the text, and even learning how to use citations the correct way. Being able to cite different sources, print, digital, and making sure that they're credible sources, as well as avoiding just copying and not doing plagiarism. So really preparing them for the college level writing that will be coming. Again, these are your writing standards, the same red. And then what you need to do is in the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I really like this because it shows that progression that I just talked about, how it goes all the way from kindergarten until 12th. And it's important to know that even if you're at this 9, if you don't have those subsequent steps, we have to go back and address that. All of these are building on each other, but it's not a perfect system, and some of the students may have gaps in their knowledge. So it's important to really look at the anchor standard and then to look at the grade level and to see how you can help support those students.
In mathematics, again, they are focused and coherent, internationally benchmarked. They're built on research-based learning progressions. They're informed by both content and rigor and define what students should understand and be able to do in their study of mathematics. We want to build both conceptual and procedural skill understandings. And we have 2 sets of standards within the mathematics standards. We have the content level standards, and we also have this 8 standards of mathematical practice, which are the foundation of how mathematicians basically work. Here again, you can see we have our key concepts in K-8, which is very structured, very much based on this is what you should know in this grade level band. Whereas when we get to high school, our courses, we have more at the district level, we have more control over the courses and how they're arranged. So, and what standards we pull in. So they go by the domain area. So in number and quantity, we want to address the real number system, quantities, complex number system, and vector and matrices. So you can see that going by the domains, we know what's included in each, and then they build on each other within the domain as well as across domains. So we want to know our standards, and here's an example of from the progression documents housed at the University of Arizona. We can see in building our geometry standards and knowledge from grades 6, 7, and 8, and then in high school, we take what they learned in elementary school and middle school and then build upon that. Achieve the Core has some applicable prerequisites for post-secondary options. So they give a list here of what you need to know as your prerequisite skills for each of the domains. And then they also have an excellent coherence map, which is interactive. So you can go in here, pick what you want, and then pick the cluster within that. And then it'll bring you to your standards. And then when you go into the standards, you can see what are the prerequisite standards for that. And then what are the standards that that standard supports and leads into. So again, you can see here's the standard, here's where it is, and then there have tasks that you can pull in. On the New Hampshire Department of Education website, we can see documents where the model competencies have been more aligned to course levels rather than across all of high school. And here are some possible standards aligned with that. This is all taken from Appendix A, or built on from Appendix A in the Common Core standards, and then the basic skills. And then we listed which courses they're typically found in. But again, at our high schools, we have more control over how our courses are developed and what's included within them.
When it comes to our science standards, most of us know the NGSS website, or the Next Generation Science Standard website. This particular website, mynsta.org, is another website that has some really good information about what the Next Generation Science Standards are and the information that is provided with them. So it's set up, it has a specific tab for high school, and you can go ahead and choose any specific disciplinary core idea that we have. So if we choose structure and function, it opens up a page that looks like this. I know it's pretty small. It's a really interactive page. I had the link on the last page here, but it gives you your performance expectations and then all the science and engineering practices, those disciplinary core ideas within them, and those cross-cutting concepts. So it's just another way to look at your standards and to understand some of the things that you need to be teaching with your courses in high school. When it comes to knowing your standards, the New Hampshire SAS modular assessments are another good way to start really thinking about your standards in a little bit different way. The ELA and math modular assessments are new this year. So these are the areas in which you can do a specific modular assessment on that New Hampshire SAS portal. So for ELA, they have editing, they have informational text, they have some listening and some reading literature modulars. And what the modulars are is they're pretty short periodic assessments that you can do. I'll talk a little bit about them in just a moment, but they're really helpful in having your students be able to apply those skills in novel situations, and for you as teachers to understand really what those skills are that are associated with some of these standards. So the ELA are here for each grade level. It's interesting, they have grade 9, 10, and 11 for math, but we are getting it so that anybody in grade 9, 10, 11, or 12 can take any of these particular assessments. So we're working on having everybody have access to that, because we know that high school is a little bit different depending on which math track you're on. If you're on something that's in a little bit more accelerated track or something where you're slowing down a little bit, some of these particular modulars might not necessarily relate to the grade in which you are currently in. And then there's some science ones as well. The science ones have always been there, so you science teachers might already know about the modular assessments, but they're on your specific life science topics here. So just a little bit about what they are is, again, they're those short periodic assessments, and they're correlated with a lot of the New Hampshire SAS summative questions in the lower grade levels, but for the high school level, it's correlated with a lot of your standards that are your high school standards for ELA, math, and science. For social studies folks, there's not really anything that is, none of them are really humanities or history related. We've talked about that and trying to, integrate that with what your specific topic areas are. But right now, the ELA ones don't necessarily correlate with your social studies and history. But some of the really helpful things is that you take these on the computer and all students get the same questions. So you're able to really look at those questions. They're all 100% based on the Common Core. They have a lot of different depth of knowledge for the questions. And again, you are able to match them up maybe with a specific unit that you're teaching or a topic that you're teaching. You might be able to do a modular assessment to see how students are doing. They can be administered at any time. And again, the current grade level I was saying, it can be administered at that grade level or any grade level that really is the most appropriate for the students in your class. They really help you as you look at the questions and see the standards that they're linked up to. They help you really dig into that standard and make sure that you are teaching to the rigor in which students need to have for those particular standards. So it's a really nice sort of gauge for you as teachers. And you're also able to see if your students are able to take what you're doing in your classroom and apply it to a different situation that may be something new to them. So when it comes to standards, here's all the different resources that we've been talking about. If you are interested in the modular assessments, we did do a whole webinar series, and we did a webinar for the modular assessments grade 9 through 12. So you can reach out to any of us if you're wondering where you might be able to find information on that. We can definitely point you in the right direction. I did see a question pop up earlier. I don't know if it was answered as I was going through those modulars, but
yes, I was able to answer. It's about a recommended sequence of courses for high school math given the standards. And I pointed them to Appendix A and the Common Core math documents. They give like a model sequence both for the traditional route and for the integrated route.
Great. Thank you, Annie.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the next portion of our webinar, we're going to talk a lot about understanding depth of knowledge.
So depth of knowledge levels are not about greater difficulty and things just getting harder. Rather, it's about cognitive rigor. So that includes flexible thinking, seeing multiple possibilities and approaches or possible perspectives on things. And it's about uncovering those perspectives or approaches to a problem, which means to understand the concepts and skills deeply and apply them broadly. So tasks we learn as a beginner, such as skiing, decoding words, using math formulas, seem a little difficult to do at first, but the more we practice them and the routines become easier and more automatic, we have integrated them into our own system, but the DOK level doesn't change. So a more complex task, such as DOK 3 or 4, requires students to really apply these skills and concepts in new and more complex tasks. So this is similar to an athletic team learning and practicing skills such as dribbling, shooting, passing, and then they use them multiple ways during an actual game, or a musician learning skills and then practicing scales and practicing them and knowing the key that you're in, and then being able to play with other people in bands and orchestras. So depth of knowledge is not a hierarchy. So it's not like Bloom's hierarchy. But in reality, the task at a lower DOK level prepares students for solving and exploring the more complex non-routine problems that come up later that require reasoning and proof and analyzing. the DOK is a tool that can be used to help you strategically scaffold learning so students can move from the basic foundational knowledge they need to a deeper understanding. So it's not the number of steps that is a determining factor of cognitive rigor. It is the non-routine nature of how one step might lead to decisions made about other steps in the process that deepens the complexity of learning. So here in math, we can see if I take problem B, I can look at that and say, oh, I just need to find the factors. I know the procedure to do that. I can easily find the factors of that quadratic equation. Then if I go to question C, it says find 3 different integers to put in the blank that will make the quadratic expression factorable. So I have to know how to factor quadratic equations. I have to be able to look at the equation and say, I have a coefficient of 1 with x squared, and then I have 4. So what do I know about that I can then come up with that middle term? And then A gets even more complex and pulls some more skills by asking you to fill in the blank by finding the largest and smallest integers that make the quadratic expression factorable. So I need to know a little more, and then I need to not only find integers that will make it true, I have to find the smallest integers that will make it true. And then Robert Kaplinski gives us some nice matrices that take several of the content area standards, and he shows you here's what a DOK1 looks like, here's what a DOK2 looks like, and here's what a DOK3 looks like. DOK4 are more for your extended, prolonged tasks that may take several days to go through or that you may work on collaboratively with other people.
So in ELA, we think about climbing the mountain. We start at DOK1, which is what we call facts. So being able to recall and produce who, what, when, where, why, and how. We move to DOK2, which is really talking about interpreting, classifying, organizing, comparing, and contrasting to determine whether it's a fact or an opinion. We move to DOK3, which is really what we should be trying to aim for, DOK3 and DOK4. Explain, connect, support your thinking, again, by citing the various texts. How did you get to that opinion? What text did you pull to show that it's grounded in evidence? Understanding the knowledge within a passage, and then being able to kind of get to that abstract theme. DOK4 is really a long-term project that would incorporate writing and critical thinking to integrate your higher knowledge to be able to creatively come up with a new idea or innovation at this point, really thinking, reflecting, and adjusting the plan to really define what your extended learning project is. We often think of the DOK web, but in this document, I felt that it was important to really show the flip chart. The web's flip chart is really important as you think about history and science reading. It shows you how to integrate again across the disciplines and really think deeply. And then Costella's level of questioning is just a different approach. It has 3 different levels instead of 4, but again, it gives you some great ideas and terms to pull out for, like, how can I make this an advanced question?
We also have Karen Hess has taken both Bloom's taxonomy and Webb's depth of knowledge and created a matrice, which includes both of those. So you can really start beginning to see what are how the cognitive demand might look like in the classroom. And she's also created them to be content specific descriptors. So the math and science is together. You have music and arts in another one, so that you can take whatever subject area you are, content area you are, and then find the matrice that gives you some specific ideas of what this might look like when you start transferring it to your classroom. And here are the links so you can see close reading and listening, math and science, written and oral communication, social studies and the humanities, and so on. So you can click on any of these depending on what content area you teach or are interested in and including with your content area. And then Matrix will give you some nice ideas of this is what it looks like. And here we also have some sites with links that can help provide you some tasks that go beyond just the DOK one.
There was one question about resources for recommending a sequence in high school science, given the standards and the state's 2-year requirement was the school year 3-year requirement.
Okay. Is somebody looking for the
I think
Yeah.
Annie's typing an answer, but I'm not sure.
Right, and I'll go, I would follow the NGSS science things and look at the model competencies that are up on the New Hampshire Department of Ed website.
Great.
But also, if you email me, then I'll see what else I can find for resources for you.
Great. We have all of our information at the end of this, so we'll make sure to get your email up there too.
Yes, we just had another question. Yes, you'll get a link to the slides tomorrow, so.
Great. All right, so now we're talking about, we have the information about the standards. We are have the information about that depth of knowledge and just a general understanding of what that might be. And now we're talking about transferring all of this now to the classroom. So one of the things that is really essential is John Hattie is somebody who works in education, and he has done thousands and thousands of studies about student learning and having students really become a part of their learning and understand what they are learning. This particular quote is a quote of his that is just talking about making sure that that teaching and learning are visible, that students really understand what their portion of this is and what is required of them to be able to do well in your particular class or to understand skills. So this is something that is on the forefront of education in general, is just making the understanding and that learning really super visible to students. We started this work a number of years ago. A lot of schools have said you need to have learning targets up on the board. You need to make sure that students understand and have a purpose, and they do. They do need to understand that, but it's a little bit more than that. Visible learning is a little more than just having your purpose up on the board or to just say, this is what we're learning today and this is why. Students really need to understand what their success criteria is, and we need to make sure that we are continuously emphasizing what their understanding needs to be and why that understanding is necessary for what is coming next.
So we always want to talk about our target learning goals and using the standards to write your learning goals. You can call them goals, you can call them I can statements. Whatever you need to do needs to be grounded in the standards. So you can put on a board, I can, and then have these ideas, and you can have the kids check off when they've done it, but it doesn't need to be a checklist. It's really kind of supporting what those standards are and then how we use them in the classroom. So I can cite strong I can cite strong and thorough text evidence to support the analysis of what a text explicitly says, as well as inference and draw from the text. So you can use those I can statements with students. You can also put the goals right on any assignment that you're using with students so that they know exactly what you're intending them to do, as well as use these for rubrics. I've used this as a rubric with my students so that they know what I'm looking for them to do. We like to kind of switch this to have more ownership. So instead of just having the I can, I know I'm successful when I can. So when do students have that ownership? They need to know first how to be able to cite text. So I know I'm successful when I can cite multiple different texts, or use a citation manager to help me cite and understand how to do that. Really just giving the students ownership is so important, and making sure that the goals are explicit and clear and grounded in the standards.
The same goes for the mathematics classroom. So transferring the standards to the classroom, we can write learning targets. So an example for multiplying a polynomial by a monomial, I can combine and multiply polynomials using a variety of approaches. I can simplify polynomial expressions into equivalent expressions. And again, supporting that student ownership by taking the I can statements and changing them into I know I am successful when I can. So I know that I'm successful when I can combine and multiply polynomials using a variety of approaches and simplify polynomial expressions into equivalent expressions. So they can see, it also helps students see this is what I can do and this is what I'm working on right now. And again, as Kate said, I can put them at the top of my problem set paper or whatever activity that you may have them working on. So not just on the board, but also on things that you may, handouts that you may have for the students. So here's an example of a problem set given to one of my Algebra 1 classes. And again, we have, here are the skills and the clusters and the standards. So this is an ELA example. And here is a math example. So I have the standard and I have the skills and the knowledge associated with it. So supporting student ownership. This is from Peter Liddell, Building Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics. So through the triangulation of data, we can construct a more accurate picture of where students are. It's not just taking one problem, one exam or quiz, but taking multiple data points at the same time and helping them to shift their focus from grades as a product of evidence to showing what they learned. So we want to evaluate what we value. We want to help students see where they are at and where they are going. And the grade is based on data, not just on points. So tools that can help us in planning, we have our scope and sequencing, we have curriculum mapping, assessment mapping, using backwards design or universal by design, and then universal design for learning. So scope and sequencing, I think, are something that most of us are very familiar with. A lot of the programs that we use include it in them. So the scope refers to the breadth and depth of the content and skills that we're going to cover, and the sequence is how we're going to progress these skills. How are we going to move our units and our lessons throughout the year? Curriculum mapping is very similar to scope and sequencing, but it usually includes links and things to the materials we're using, or specific materials or activities and lesson plans are built into the scope and the sequencing. Assessment mapping is something that is newer to many of us, but it's a way to ensure that the types of assessments that we're choosing are being chosen for the right reason and giving us the information that we want on our student learning. It also allows for review of our assessments are designed to meet the intended learning objectives of the curriculum. And it also helps us to identify what are the crunch points for students and for you. And if you do have crunch points, can any of this be mitigated? And are the assessments based on too many of the same learning objectives? Or are there learning objectives that we accidentally overlooked and we're not getting any assessment data on? It works well with backwards design approach to planning and teaching. What are our standards and learning objectives? How are we going to assess them? And then we can plan our lessons to get the students there. Assessment mapping also lets us take a look at not only our classroom assessments and school-wide assessments, but also what are the state assessments and even national assessments that students may take, and recognizing that each of these different levels of assessments provide different data for us to use. So we want to ensure the assessments are appropriate for a specific purpose. We want to design and or select assessments that align with this purpose. We also want to interpret and use the data from the assessments to address student needs and then planning forward, as well as looking at our curriculum needs. PLCs can support collaboration to develop assessments, analyze data, and plan next steps in the use of evidence for us. So, effects of planning and using assessments. We want to use effective classroom assessment strategies to inform our teaching and learning practices. We want to ensure that the right evidence is being used for the right purposes. So my classroom assessments are really going to drive what I'm doing in my classroom with the students in front of me, whereas the state assessments give us an overview of helping us to look at our curriculum more critically and see where we really have things down and where we have gaps that we may need to fill in as we develop the curriculum further. Improve skills in critiquing and in revising existing assessments if necessary. And it also allows us to have deeper knowledge on our current student understandings and helping us to make better instructional decisions for those students in front of us. And then making more efficient and effective use of information from both the district and the state level assessments. Our overall goal, though, are our educational outcomes making sure they're improving our student learning.
All right. One of the big pushes in education right now as well is this Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. So this is basically an approach to how you're teaching, what your curriculum is, and how you are assessing students. A lot of the research around the Universal Design for Learning is grounded in the sciences and specifically neuroscience. So how students' brains work and ways in which we can make sure that we are tapping into all different types of learners. So really what it's doing is we're looking at it really changes the way that we're looking at things. Basically, what we do right now is we teach and we are expecting students to adapt to what our instruction is. And what Universal Design for Learning is it takes a look at what all of our students learning and the way that they learn in all different ways. And we adapt our teaching to make sure that we're taking away any of that complexity or any of those barriers for students who might learn in a little bit different way. It really, the way that we've been working in education, and we can't help it sometimes, is we teach to the middle. We teach to where the most of the students that we have in our classrooms are, because that's what we are able to do. But what Universal Design for Learning does is it has you teach to the outliers, so to the students that are on either end of the spectrum. And if we're meeting the needs of both of those sets of students, we will naturally meet also the needs of all those students in the middle. So to take a little bit different look at this, here is CAST is one of the biggest organizations here in New Hampshire that works on this Universal Design for Learning. And there's really 3 different areas that they look at. The first one is student engagement. Then they look at multiple means of representation or understanding, and then that action and expression. So basically the how of what they're learning. So this particular sort of representation on the right-hand side is a way that helps us scaffold a lot of what we're doing in the classroom. And you can see here that there's this access, build, and then there's really getting all the information and in their understanding, and then all the goals of what we're trying to do here. So it's not necessarily different from differentiated instruction, but it is really more of a framework of how we run all of our classrooms, regardless of the students that we have in it. When we think of differentiation, we think of a specific student or set of students that we need to differentiate our instruction because we know where they are and we need to meet their needs. What Universal Design for Learning does is it creates a little bit more of a toolbox for you to say, it doesn't matter who the students are, these are some of the ways in which I am going to present information, knowing that I'm meeting the needs of a lot of the students in my classroom. So maybe you teach math and there's a specific way. You had a student, years ago, or even last year or currently, that you had a student that when you explained something in a specific way, they really understood it. So what ends up happening is you start taking the way that you're explaining it, or maybe you were using manipulatives that you hadn't used before, or a different way of breaking a problem apart. And you now incorporate that every single time you teach that particular type of problem, because you know that there are probably students who are that's going to be resonating with them. So you start to kind of build this toolbox up. This is another sort of way to look at it as well, is it's that backwards design. So what are your objectives? What do you want students to be able to do? What are you going to do how are they going to provide evidence that they've learned it? Right? And what are you going to do to be able to engage students and to make sure that students are understanding these skills, right? We need to make sure that things are very intentional and flexible, that students have a lot of options. Something that we're really trying to work on, specifically at the high school level, is being able to show your understanding in more than just one way. Are we giving them that flexibility to say, you can show your learning maybe in a little bit different way than what I've asked of you before, which might be a written test or a specific way to write a paper, right? So in our classes, we have specific competencies and we need them to be able to meet those competencies, but we want to have flexibility in having students be able to show that particular understanding. Another tool that we have and a resource that is available is something that's called the Lexile and Quantile Hub. This is something that is an online platform. It can be used for parents and students, but really for educators, there's a lot of different resources and tools that they have on this website. The New Hampshire Department of Education has a sponsorship for us. So any educator in New Hampshire can go on the Lexile Quantile Hub. You can register and it's free. And so all the resources are available to you because of the Department of Education. There is the Lexile area, and then the Quantile area, which is math. Most of the English teachers and humanities teachers I know, most teachers in general understand Lexile. They've heard that word before. Quantile is something I think that is a little bit newer. And so they work a lot with the quantile level of students and where students are at and where their skills are. And it gives you some just general information about maybe some of the prerequisite skills for math that students might be lacking. So they're not getting the concepts in your particular class. It can also say if the students are getting these particular concepts, where do I go from here? There's a lot for the quantile area. There's a lot of information about lessons and some of the resources there, like videos that you might be able to share with students to be able to understand certain skills. So this is what the Lexile tool area of the Lexile Quantile Hub is. You've got all of these different areas specifically for high school, the Lexile career database, and just in general, understanding what those measures are, and a growth planner and all these grade level charts are really good resources. These are the Quantile tools that I was talking about. You've got your math skills database that you can look at. This teacher assistant is where you're able to put in a specific standard, and then you can see all of the skills that are associated with that standard, and they've got resources that are available for it, as well as the career database here. When you get this particular the slides tomorrow, these are linked right to the Lexile Quantile Hub. And then this is for the Department of Education. They have a Lexile and Quantile measure area of their particular website as well. All right. Any questions as we're moving towards the tail end here?
We will share the slides with them, correct? And the other slides about the other modules.
The specific, the grades 9 through 12 modular assessments is not going to be part of the email that's sent out to tomorrow. It will be specifically the resources for this. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put up the email addresses here. You can email me, Heather Jenkins, and I will get you the link to that modular assessments for grades 9, like the high school grades, and any of the resources that go along with that. So definitely just shoot me an email and I'll get right back to you and give you the link.
I see no other questions at this time.
Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll hang on for just a little bit, make sure that there's no other questions. Again, there will be a survey that pops up. If you have any other questions or need anything after this webinar is completed, definitely reach out to any of us. We want to make sure we're available for you and helping you navigating the high school realm. So we appreciate you being here today.